Good morning. It's March 5th. The March State Board of Education meeting will now come to order. Agenda item 1. Andrea, please call the roll.
Patty Goobles.
Present.
Jacqueline Morrison.
Present.
Deborah Neary.
Present.
Patsy Kojons.
Here.
Lisa Fricke.
Here.
Maureen Nichols.
Here.
Robin Stevens.
Here.
Patricia Tim.
Yes.
Commissioner Bloomstead.
Present.
All present.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I move to item 1.3, I just want everyone to know that we have 2 board members Zooming in this morning. Agenda item 1.3, information regarding the Open Meetings Act is posted as you enter the room from the main hallway doors. The Open Meetings Act is also posted on the State Board of Education's website. Agenda item 1.4, meeting protocol. Ryan. Good morning.
Well, I don't know how many virtual meetings the board has had this year. I guess we could figure it out, but we have the protocol in place. And so a friendly reminder about the self-screening questionnaire for temperature and other conditions. And I put that forth for both the public and staff in attendance and board members, and encourage you to continue to wear your masks. The guidance that we have is that if you're at least 6 feet from someone and you're talking, you're speaking, you might drop the mask, but then to put it back on when you're done. Please continue to maintain 6 feet social distance, physical distance from others, and please continue to refrain from shaking hands, using hand sanitizer, practicing those other non-pharmaceutical interventions. So it seems like we're on the home stretch to not having those protocol in place, but they are still in place, and we still are required to wear masks here in Lincoln in this property.
Thank you, Ryan. Agenda item 2. We will now have public comment period. This period of public comment is available for any person who wishes to address the State Board on subjects within its authority. Please note that public comment should be on topics related to the State Board's constitutional and statutory authority. Thanks to the members of the public who are in attendance today. Agenda item 2.1, request for 10-minute special appearance. We have one 10-minute special appearance today. John Wyville has requested and been granted a special appearance to comment. John, you have 10 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you, President Nichols, members of the board, Commissioner of Education. My name is John Wyville. I'm the Executive Director for the Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you about a horrible, horrific event that happened about lack of communication access involving a deaf wrestler at a school-sanctioned activity at a state championship match. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of context. The Nebraska Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing is an advocacy organization, is an independent state agency that provides and advocates for communication access and also provides recommendations and suggestions to state agencies and other entities. And we hope at the end I do have a recommendation based on the information that I present to you. And what I want to do, first of all, is give you an update that has not been reported yet. Is the NSAA met with me last Friday, so we discussed the concerns of the family as well as the concerns of the commission. And pursuant to that, the NSAA is conducting a due diligence review and had promised that review to be completed and report the findings within 2 weeks from last Friday. To NSAA's credit, a representative from that office traveled to Scottsbluff to meet with the family personally earlier this week to show the importance and of the concerns raised by the family and the agency. And I will just comment a little bit later about furthering up. But leading up to the match, Paul Ruff, a wonderful young man who happens to be deaf, is a wrestler who had wrestled in the Gering, Scottsbluff, Panhandle area for 4 years. And during his life and time as a wrestler, communication access had been provided to all the matches that he'd been at during the wrestling during his 4 years. Also, communication access had been provided to him. So let's lead up to the actual match. He qualified for the state tournament, and prior to that match, had communication access up to the final act. Now, in the important stage of a state championship match, the NSAA, with the best of intention, and there's no doubt here that they were acting with the best of intention, appointed what they felt was the best referee possible for that match. They appointed an individual based on peers and fellow coaches, is my understanding, a referee that they felt would be appropriate for that situation. Unfortunately, that particular ref did not have the cultural competency in working with deaf athletes. And so when, with best of intention, they were appointing someone that they thought was best here, unfortunately, with wrestlers that have worked with a deaf wrestler, there was a number of wrestlers, officials that would have been better suited and better qualified for that situation. And as we saw throughout the match, is that the communication access was provided, and then inexplicably in the overtime and double overtime, there was a breakdown of a lapse of judgment, whatever it may have been. There was a breakdown in communication and unfortunately led to a very tragic result. Not going to belabor the tape or the thing to all of you, but just to point out a couple examples. A referee in a mask talking to a deaf wrestler from behind, not sure the thought process there for that. In addition, a couple times attempting to communicate with that individual without removing his mask in his front. For a person who is deaf, that is kind of hard to communicate effectively. So, afterward, after the actual match, to the credit of the person that won, Paul Garcia, this is a young man that just won his 4th state championship. In the highlight and pinnacle of his accomplishment, a ultimate sportsman noted in the Omaha World Herald, he agreed, yeah, I don't think communication access was there. This is a very classy young man who acknowledges in the height of the accomplishment. The spectators that have watched it had commented on the thing that they did not think communication access was provided, in addition to the family. So want to share that comment and that. In the aftermath also, despite it being a horrible situation, a tragic situation, that there was outpouring of expressions of support from the National Association for the Deaf, the Nebraska Association for the Deaf, our agency, and scores of people across the country and in the state expressing support for this young man. And so the question here is, in terms of the support, is in light of what happened, is what can we do? All of us in this room, we are educators, we are professionals, and say, what can we learn from this? And my purpose for you to addressing you for this particular important thing is showing the importance of the need for cultural competency. The NSAA will respond to the family at some point involving the issues here. But the most important thing that I come to you, being a Board of Education, is sharing the concern for communication access, because in addition to the outpouring of support, we've had at least 2 individuals that have been deaf wrestlers that said they've had similar circumstances. And we understand here, and not to belabor the match, but to understand here, moving forward, the lesson to be learned would be the opportunity here for cultural competency, for equity, for moving forward. What can we do to ensure that we minimize the risk of this happening? Everything in life for these individuals are teachable moments and lessons. This issue will not define Paul Ruff. This lack of communication will not derail his future and his future goal. And I think he's been blessed with the outpouring of support and realizing how many people have supported him. But I do want to take a lesson that we learned from this and the board that we have, just you, just the commissioner, just us, justice, we can do something to make a difference moving forward for the lessons concerned. And I close by saying the commissioner is very proud of the fact that he always says his philosophy is every student, every day. I believe that. I know all of you believe that. Unfortunately, that did not happen, but we can learn from that. And the lesson that we have for all of us to say is, what can we learn from that as we strive for greater inclusion, greater equity, is to say, look, one important piece that we can add, that despite the best of intentions of everybody involved, something bad happened. Let's not leave it at that and make something good out of this by focusing on what can we do in terms of cultural competency and training to make sure that this doesn't happen, to improve communication access, not only for this athlete, but for all athletes and all people with disabilities that choose to participate in state-sanctioned activities. So I thank you very much for your time and would welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, John, for attending. We appreciate you being here and sharing the information. Thank you.
Suggest as some resources for us to kind of review some of the cultural competencies that you're talking about, and where can we go to look for them, or do you offer trainings, or what do you think is the best resource for us if we're trying to learn more about these subject matters?
It's a very good question. I think specifically for deaf and hard of hearing, don't hesitate to contact the commission. We can certainly provide the training. However, there are some other organizations, I think, in terms of shared governance that you might want to consider. That would be the Daniela Conrad with the Nebraska Civil Liberties Union, Eric Evans with the Disability Rights Nebraska. Those are a couple that come to mind that would be part of not only just deaf and hard of hearing, but the broader spectrum of people with disabilities. And we, as a state agency, can certainly provide support free of charge, and also, as appropriate in certain circumstances, provide and pay for nationally qualified trainers. And I also want to make sure we want to be part of the solution. If I was able to coach the Nebraska football team on Monday, they would probably only lost 1 game last year. And so we want you to feel that we want to be part of the solution. I didn't want to sit up here and be an armchair quarterback, second guess NSAA, second guess the officials, second guess anybody else to say, this happened, we want to be part of anything moving forward to help see it doesn't happen again.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Agenda item 2.2. We will now move to our 5-minute public comment period. I would like to remind you to please sign in if you have not already done so. There are sign-in cards on a table outside of the meeting room. We have 1 public comment card turned in, and the public will speak, and we just have 1 card. You will have 5 minutes to speak during the public comment period. And Marion Holstein, please come forward. Thank Thank you for being here.
Thank you, President Nichols, school board members, Commissioner Bloomstead. I'm very glad to be here today. I don't have very many new things I want to speak with you about, but I do want to refer back to the June 5th comments, June 5th, 2020 comments that I sent to the board. Oh, I can remove this now, right? Okay. And one of the issues remains, and that is teacher reciprocity and teacher licensing. As you know, I can say safely that our 4 schools on the reservations are either CSI or priority schools. And this last year, I know in Winnebago that we had 13 new teachers. And for us, it's critical that we try to recruit Native American teachers. And while we do have 4 teachers in Winnebago, and those numbers are growing in Santee and Macy and Waltill also, you know, the growth is just too slow. And I think that possibly the stringency of the in-state testing could be one of the problems. I didn't have as much time to research as I wanted to, but I know that there are at least 4 states who waive the praxis and other tests if teachers are applying with at least 3 years of education from another state. 3 years. So there's, you know, it's very involved, and I just want to basically notify you that I do want to do more research on that, et cetera. Plus, there's a $1,500 fee for out-of-state teachers coming into Nebraska. I haven't had a chance to determine if that's pretty standard across the state. You know, there are those, you know, I've talked with our superintendent, and I said, if we can recruit Native teachers, then I think that we probably should look at some way to pay that fee to help them. So I just wanted to bring up that subject again, keep it on a, you know, keep it in our discussion. Another thing I wanted to speak about is mascots. I'm not going to refer to any particular school since we do have the state tournament occurring right now, and when I leave, I'm going to go to our Winnebago Girls Championship game. I was speaking with Dr. Ford, and I was really torn, but this is as important for them as the game. So the Department of Health and Human Services, Region 5, held in conjunction with that local Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, conducted a brief workshop or comment time last month. And there were some people from Nebraska on the call, and there are some similar attitudes that we have been fighting against for years. And one of them was that, well, we named the school the Indians or the Warriors, whatever, because we're trying to honor those tribes. But that's not the point. What happens with those names when children, families, and whatever start attributing other remarks, actions, etc. So that in no way honors us. And at that last session, I said, well, if you do really want to honor us, then honor and respect us and respect our wishes that these caricatures of our people no longer be tolerated. So it's still a fight, but as you know, it's been a long fight. Dr. Suzanne Harjo has been fighting this for quite a long time. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you about is to notify you that the National Indian Education Association Conference is going to be held in October 13th through the 16th in Omaha. Right now, we're moving a little slow on not slow, it's just the timeline is set. And, but right now, I am looking at an institute for Native American studies, and to be able to put whatever lessons we develop more in context for teachers, instead of just pulling out a lesson without really having that background and or our cultural identity and thoughts behind that. So please look forward. Hopefully I will see you next month with a few more items. And welcome to the new school board members. And I'm missing the others, but thank you for all the work that you do and the time that you put into this endeavor. Thank you. Pinagigi.
Marion, for being here. I think we would all join together in saying we wish the Winnebago girls good luck.
Okay, I'll let them know.
Okay, great. Agenda item 2.3, written public comment. We have no written comments. Agenda item 3, Commissioner's report. Commissioner? Agenda overview and consent agenda process.
I'll take a little bit of run down the routines and a little bit of liberty just to kind of set some other context for us for the meeting and thinking behind and ahead both maybe a little bit as we continue to do this work. First of all, just consent agenda items, and I don't believe we had any that were asked to be removed, so I appreciate that. If there was something, please let us know in the course of this today. The report on rules, there's no rules to update on, so I'm saving you all sorts of time. So that's why or save myself all sorts of time. So what I did want to highlight just a little bit for you on the rest of the agenda today, and I know from even last time, as we still sort out kind of where federal funds are at and where we go, and I know we had great conversations within committee about where the strategic plan is, and I appreciate that. I can tell if I turn my head, it doesn't come in as good, so I feel a little awkward. And do this. Hopefully that's better. Yeah, I think that's better. So anyway, the real opportunity, I think, for us to kind of start tying these pieces of our work together in where we're going with the strategic plan, how we integrate the efforts on what we do on pandemic recovery and what's going to happen. And it was actually Deborah Neer asked the question yesterday, can we reflect a little bit of where the federal government's going? And I think we'll be better positioned to know that at the April meeting. So I would propose we'd spend some time at the April meeting also being able to discuss those things. I know today as we go through the various agenda items, it gives us a chance to kind of tie pieces together. And one of our struggles always in any type of board setting is, you know, committee members are doing their work diligently in their committees, and then as we have the dialogue, I just ask you to try to connect those dots as best as you can and know that this is part of that ongoing dialogue to inform one another about what's taking place in our committees and how we make that, you know, ultimately work. I will also just kind of, with all the federal funds things going on, I wanted to make sure that I provided an update. Maybe it gets talked about a little bit in legislative committee, but a little bit of an update as the Department of Ed staff, myself and Bryce Wilson will be presenting to the legislature next week kind of an overview of CARES, or I want to call it CARES funding. It's evolved over time, but all the different federal funds that have become available for schools and education in this point in time. And I share that with you because obviously some of the agenda items today include some of our work with existing federal funds to help us steer this conversation and ongoing conversation. But not all of those decisions have been made, and we keep kind of wanting to make sure those get aligned with an appropriate kind of process with our goals in mind on how we continue to move on that front. And that even includes, I know last time we had some discussion over some of those issues. We have the EANS funds that we were working on. We have that, which are the funds for non-public schools, and we also have the framework that we had laid out. So we continue to use that, and I just wanted to put that out there as context, even on the EANS funds, for instance. And I appreciated the broad ability to move forward from last meeting. What I will tell you is we actually haven't yet executed a contract with a third party, but I did appreciate the dialogue with you last time, because it actually gave us a little bit of a place to be able to move forward and think about how we do the application process and continue to negotiate that on that side. We did release an RFI. We had one responding entity to it. I don't want to talk too deep about that as we kind of still try to do that negotiation, but we've met with all the non-public school leaders as part of that process as well, asking them what's going to be most effective and how that can work, and continue to do that I guess kind of due diligence on those processes. And so I just share that with you because all this stuff ties together in trying to make sure that we can do that and do that well. The last thing, I just have to thank staff that have been working very, very hard. As you all know, I mean, we're in the midst of the move out of the physical building of the 6th floor. In fact, we had to be out by March 1st, and I think largely we were out by the middle of February, or at least the staff had packed up by then. And so I know the moving company's in place to be able to do that. It'll be weeks, if not months, before we're set up in the new facility. And so it's going to take us some particular time to do all that work. And just one of the dynamics is we have to work obviously with DAS, the State Building Division, all those as part of that process. And there's a consent agenda item, for instance, right on that topic about our lease. And so it's an interesting moment in time, but I appreciate when it gets sunny and 60 degrees compared to sunny and 20 below. So with that, I will literally, I think, move over to Ryan's report first, or in that order, and then I think I have, because I shut my computer, I think I have Corey and Brad. So.
Okay, I'm back. You might remember last month I gave you some homework of some upcoming topics to be informed on, and so those topics are still there. I'd followed up with an email giving you some reading material and would encourage you to continue in your effort to be educated and informed, or re-educated or re-informed, or a refresher on each of those topics. So those haven't changed. Just a reminder, we're here at the Courtyard by Marriott through June for sure. And so we'll continue to meet, the board will continue to meet at this site, and then we'll continue to pay attention to the risk dial, the pandemic numbers, the guidance that we're getting from Lancaster Lincoln Health Department and DHHS in terms of what August and beyond will look like. A reminder on some conferences. Coming up March 22nd and 23rd is the NASB Legislative Conference. And so if you have not registered for that, it's virtual. If you've not registered and want to, please reach out to either Andrea or Laura as soon as possible so that we can get registered for that, get you registered for that. The NERCSA Conference, Nebraska Rural Community Schools Association, is holding their conference in person March 25th and 26th. President Nichols has asked the board members who largely represent rural parts of the state, so Patty, Pat, Tim, Robin, and herself, to be part of the panel on the 25th. All board members are welcome to attend the conference, and so again, get registered for that, and your registration for that is free, courtesy of NERCSA. That session is at 11 o'clock on the 25th, Thursday, the board session. Commissioner will speak at the lunch that day in Kearney at noon. If you haven't heard, NCSA, the Nebraska Council of School Administrators, is planning on having their event, Administrator Days, in person in Kearney. The dates for that are July 28th through the 30th. We will be meeting with them very soon to determine what the NDE day will look like on that Wednesday. But the conference site has been secured, and NCSA is making plans going forward for their conference. That is my report, Commissioner.
Okay. If there were any questions, I guess I think that was pretty straightforward, so we're good to go. I'm going to introduce, and hopefully Corey Epler is able to hear and be able to join us for a bit of a presentation on the Reading Improvement Act. And by way of introduction, I think we're actually very, very proud of the work that's being taken place here on this level, and we've had many different opportunities to engage with folks that have been, well, I would say very complimentary of what Corey and the department staff have done on this front, and appreciate that work. So I'll turn it over to Corey if he's here.
I'm here.
All right.
Good morning. I will try to share my screen, so I'm not as Teams proficient as I am with Zoom. So hopefully you can see the presentation. Thanks for the opportunity to connect just briefly this morning. Wanted to provide just some update relative to the requirements of the Nebraska Reading Improvement Act, but then more specifically our efforts around Nebraska Reads. Dr. Abby Burke and Dr. Marissa Pazant and I shared this information with the committee last month, and we wanted to come back to the full board just to highlight a few pieces. You just have me today. Abby and Marissa are in other meetings this morning, so I'll do my best to articulate our vision and our work as we move forward. I did just want to call out first, part of our effort over the last several years is also to really clarify our vision for literacy instruction. And I would say that's PK through 12th grade. Obviously with the Nebraska Reading Improvement Act, we're thinking about and focused on K-3, but really when we think about our vision for literacy in Nebraska, it is a systems approach, and it does impact pre-K through 12th grade. So I did want to really acknowledge this work, as well as the revision of the Nebraska English Language Arts standards, which we are also working on at this time as well. The other thing that I just wanted to call attention to was the state board position statement on early literacy that was adopted in 2019. And I'll be real honest, we're really proud of this position statement because we think that the content of plan. So the reading communities really to support the reading development. And just if I were to boil down, like, what is the spirit of the law around the Nebraska Reading Improvement Act? And really it is around ensuring early identification and targeted interventions for struggling readers to make sure that they are proficient by the end of 3rd grade. Now, when this law first was moving through the unicameral and was signed by the governor, I think there was probably mixed feelings across the state, but really what we tried to do was to leverage this as an opportunity to elevate the conversation around early literacy. And through that, we have developed what has become known as Nebraska Reads. And Nebraska Reads is our clearinghouse, if you will, of resources to ultimately support implementation of the Reading Improvement Act, but more specifically, really to provide tools and practices that help districts think about how they can improve the early literacy skills of our K-3 students. And you'll see the website is up there. I know some of you have probably seen it and looked at the resources on there, but a lot of great things that we're able to really central around this idea of Nebraska Reads. Just a few things I want to mention that are on the Nebraska Reads website. So as required by law, the Nebraska Department of Education has to approve reading assessments, and we do have the list of approved assessments, as well as what the law calls threshold levels. What that indicates is the performance level on a given assessment that would ultimately determine if a student does or does not have a reading deficiency per the law. We've included a ton of communication resources, both for schools and families, and those have just been a real hit, to be honest with you. We have videos, we have resources that are available in both English and Spanish, not only for our schools, but also for our families. IRIP is the Individualized Reading Improvement Plan, so we have templates up there and guidance. I'll say probably our biggest hit of one of the resources is our Read at Home plan, which is designed to provide support for families and caregivers as they're working with students on their early literacy skills. I believe we have this in 5 or 6 languages as well. So this was something that was really important as school buildings were closing last year in March and April. We know that many schools actually just printed it off and sent it home for their students. We have a list of evidence-based practices and working with the What Works Clearinghouse, so really being able to drill into the idea of evidence-based practices to help improve literacy instruction. And the other thing, we've really been intentional about linking the conversations around dyslexia with our efforts in Nebraska Reads. So wanting to make sure that we include guidance around supporting students with dyslexia. And I might also mention students with binocular vision disorders. So we know that some of our students may not have a reading disorder as much as they have a binocular vision disorder. So really working with the Nebraska Optometric Association and providing tools and resources to help understand and really diagnose exactly what students need in order to improve their reading skills. I did want to call this report out. Number one, Commissioner Bloomstead, as president of CCSSO, is mentioned in the front pages of this report that was recently released. But it was exciting because Nebraska was highlighted in this report to the nation around how state education leaders can help every child learn to read. So we know that our work has a long way to go, yet we're also really proud of the progress that we've made. And it's always nice when others recognize our efforts. But even more importantly, the efforts of our educators and our administrators throughout the state. So I wanted just to highlight, as we think about Nebraska Reads and the implementation of the Reading Improvement Act, some of our priorities moving forward. We did conduct some stakeholder engagement sessions back in May and June. Hard to believe that was almost a year ago, really to get some greater sense around what are the needs in K-3 reading instruction and implementation of the Reading Improvement Act. And we also wanted to use this to really identify future priorities for our work as we think about how we ultimately support our schools and our school districts and our communities as well. And I might just mention, so out of that stakeholder process with educators, with administrators, with community members and families, we found that there were 4 needs that we really hope to continue to center as our priorities move forward. Number 1 is continuing to emphasize and expand high quality coursework within educator preparation. And thankful that Brad Dirksen and Kelly Heineke are leading great work around endorsements, revisions, but really ensuring that our teachers are coming out of their educator preparation programs ready to teach reading, and have had experiences that allow them to provide the appropriate support for students in K-3. We'll continue our efforts around high quality instructional materials and assessments. We've been really focused over the last 4 years to ensure that students have access to high quality instructional materials, and I believe we are well on our path to making progress. But again, we know that high quality instructional materials for early literacy are grounded in the science of reading and have built in the appropriate diagnostic and interventions as well. We will continue to emphasize high quality professional learning, and then also the need to continue to provide family and student support resources and tools. I did just want to mention this, that this was one of the priority issues in our biennial budget request. Was around advancing early literacy, and we really thought of this in 2 phases, how we might start with professional learning for teachers and leaders, moving into phase 2 of be awesome to have a literacy coaching network across the state, and then continuing our family engagement focus. And the commissioner will have to tell you how that went with the appropriations committee, but again, this was a biennial budget request that we put forward as well. And then I also just wanted to call out, we're mindful of what the school year has brought and the challenges in teaching our youngest learners to read. But we continue to move forward with supports relative to the Nebraska framework for school renewal and acceleration. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen, hopefully, and end there.
Corey. I don't know if any folks have questions for Corey while we have him. I just wanted to, yeah, there are some questions. So Corey, one thing.
Commissioner, I can't hear you all, so.
Uh-oh. We'll try again. Can you hear yet? I don't want to advertise for any cell phone companies. Can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear you, so that works out great for me.
Perfect. That's what it's not boss's day, so that's good. So
I'm not sure if Pat or Robin can hear.
I wish I could tell Corey we didn't hear any of his presentation, but that wouldn't be.
If it doesn't work, we can have them submit the questions and.
Yeah, I'm a little worried they can't hear now. I wonder if we ought to take.
Not sure of the problem. It's showing that we're sending audio, so I'm not sure what's going on.
Should we take maybe a 5-minute break and see if we can do that? Yeah.
Let's take about a 5-minute break, and perhaps Drew and Ben can get this figured out for us. Okay, we have returned, and Commissioner, do we have Corey with us, or are we moving on? There were some questions for Corey.
Yeah, so if Corey can, I don't know if he can hear. Corey? Uh-oh. Pat, Tim, can you hear us? We might have lost sound again.
Pat, can you hear us? No, she can't hear us.
I wonder if it's connected to broadcast.
We will be patient.
Can you contact both of them? Can you contact Court directly? Just have, that's no. I'm talking about the show.
Because so many people on the internet, you know, are like dismissing it as, you know, one more. Yeah, I
Can you try your microphone, Commissioner?
Ask Court to come back.
Corey, can you hear?
You can't message people directly.
a little bit anyway. But that's the strength. Yeah.
Picture, I have full picture of the board. I have a little picture of me at the bottom, and I can hear you.
Oh, you can hear
Okay.
us now. Good.
I got off and I rejoined. Andrea has up her hand, so I wonder if that means they can hear us.
Yes. Can you, Deb, can you hear?
And I think I can. It's very extremely faint, but I can hear you.
All right. I don't
Yeah,
know. Oops.
I
Still
can,
barely.
mhm.
Well, we're turned all the way.
Can you ask Court?
All right.
My mic is on, Drew.
Corey, can you hear us though?
I can hear you barely.
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you barely too.
All right, let's take one more break, and I'm gonna have these guys all connected different ways, remotely.
We're going to take another short break. Okay, we're going to try this again. If Corey is with us, we have some board members that have questions on the reading.
I'm here. I can hear you now.
There you are. Okay. Patsy, you had a question?
Yes. Is my mic on? No? Okay. Now it is, okay. All right, Corey, first of all, I was happy to hear you speak about binocular vision and the part it plays in students being late readers or not being able to read. So I was wondering, what do you have in place, or what does Nebraska have in place for diagnosing binocularism, and is there equity about that for students who would not have financial access to that kind of diagnosis?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll say I'm not the expert, and Patsy, you probably know an eye doctor that would be able to help out with Dr. Babin, who's the past president of the Nebraska Optometric Association. One of the programs that they have that we've been promoting is See to Learn, which I think it is for 3-year-olds that would be able to get a free comprehensive screening. And what we've been trying to do is to promote that resource. I think the other piece that is part of a conversation, even from a policy perspective, is what are the requirements around comprehensive vision screenings for our earliest learners. And I think that's a place where the Nebraska Optometric Association has visited with us around perhaps ensuring that all students have that comprehensive eye exam versus a screening, and having that eye exam by a optometrist versus someone who may not have that type of training. I do know that the organization is doing some pilots. Specifically, I know they've done a pilot with Beatrice Public Schools, because I think we're also really interested in knowing if students have some type of binocular vision disorder, first, making sure that we're diagnosing it correctly so they can get appropriate treatment, but also have a feeling that some of those students are being referred to special education where they do not have a learning disability, but it's an issue that can be corrected through their eye doctor. So I don't have a good answer in terms of, some of the specifics around how we can ensure every student has access to those types of trainings, but the See to Learn program, I think, is one program that is developed specifically to ensure if folks aren't able to afford comprehensive eye screenings, they can get one for free.
Is it possible, Madam President, that I ask another question? Yes. Okay. My other question is then the See to Learn program that you're discussing, is it included in information that's accessible to parents and schools and school leaders?
Yes, it is. Actually, I was going to say it's included in our resource. Like, we do have a resource specifically that talks about binocular vision disorders. We have a flyer. I was going to put it in the chat, but I guess that won't work. And in there, we have a link to be able to connect folks to clinics that offer those types of screenings. So yes, we continue to share that specifically through our Nebraska Reads website.
I think I already knew the answer to that, but I thought maybe my fellow board members might like to hear the answer to that. Thank you, Corey.
I see Brian has his hand up. Brian?
So there's 2 other separate statutes. There's the requirement of a physical exam of the student that includes an eye examination when they enroll in the beginner grade. And then there's a separate set of statutes about the annual physical screenings that school districts put on that does include an eye exam there. It may not necessarily get to binocular vision, but those 2 things go on each school year.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Madam President.
I think you had a question.
I have
several comments and then a question. The first is just. Sure. I have several comments and then a question. First, thank you to Corey and Abby and Marissa for truly taking the spirit of the law beyond the law. The Nebraska Reads provides so many resources that will be invaluable to people who are working with and helping children learn to read. The vision is PK, and I started thinking about Nebraska Reads and whether we will continue to extend that beyond the K3 as required by the law. And I'm thinking that because we all know that reading readiness begins a long time before children go to preschool or to kindergarten. You know, if you think about that, children at the age of 3 typically say 1,000 words, and by 5 they're saying 5,000 words, and that's just their expressive language. It's not what they know and understand. And the point I'm getting to here is that with vocabulary development, the key is making meaning. So it's imperative for people, parents, preschool teachers, caregivers, to really understand how to expand vocabulary, to use expanded language for children to make meaning so that they don't start off being behind in terms of words that they understand. So I guess the question that is in there is what are you doing or thinking about doing in terms of literacy development, reading readiness in those very early years?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and that's actually one of the great things about Abby's position as our reading specialist, because it's shared across early childhood education, special education, and teaching, learning, and assessment. So Abby's charge is, as we continue to build out resources and supports, to ensuring that there is that connection to the pre-K space. And certainly I think we have work to do in that, but we're being very mindful to ensure that that connection is seamless. I might also say too, as we revise the English language arts standards, so those grade level standards start in K. However, building from the early childhood standards as well, to make sure that there is again, that coherence from pre-K into K is really important. And I might just add on the other side of that. So I think about, I've been doing some reading just about our older students who struggle to read. So I'm thinking about 9th and 10th graders who are reading on a 3rd or 4th grade level. And I think there also needs to be intentional support for teachers, because how we would go about teaching a 9th grader how to learn to get caught up is a little bit different than how we would spend time with a 2nd or 3rd grader, because in the older grades, really focusing on fluency and modeling that versus doubling down on phonics instruction. So targeted phonics instruction is important, but modeled fluency is just really critical for our older students. So yes, that's a long way of saying yes, we're trying to be intentional on both sides of the K3 space, so the pre-K and into our older students. And continue to improve in those areas as well.
Thank you.
Okay. We have Pat Tim who wants to speak. Pat?
Okay, thank you.
We can't.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. When I was at the Family Resource Center, we are fortunate in a community this size to have pediatricians at our hospital. And they were very interested in, we have a program called Ready, Set, Go, which is for families prior to school starting, for school supplies and health checks and things like that. And I remember one year our pediatricians actually handed out books then. And so I think that's an avenue in your community, is to do some partnering. with pediatrics right from the very beginning, as you were talking that birth to 3 piece. I think that would be a good, that would be my suggestion perhaps for a good partnership in your community, that you talk to parents and say, you know, talk to your pediatrician right off the bat, and then, you know, somehow, Corey, give all that information to pediatrician offices.
Anyone else have, Jacqueline?
I just have one question, and I thought about it when I heard Patty speaking, when she stated that about the vocabulary of children, and we know that it's also been shown that the vocabulary of their parents really plays a role in terms of the education level of the parent. And so I was wondering, when we're looking at creating strategies and looking at assessments for children, are we also taking into consideration that demographic information, knowing that the children who may come from homes with parents who have less education may need extra work or may need different resources? When we're looking through that equity lens and equity component, is that something that we're considering?
I would say it's something we consider. I would say that probably comes to life more at the local level. So, and I also think that's where it's really critical that our core instruction materials are really central around building knowledge, because that's one of the key features of making sure kids are ready or on grade level, is how we actually help build knowledge through the resources and through the materials that they're reading. So I think we're certainly mindful as we build statewide supports and resources and professional learning. But again, I think much of that is going to rest with the local level. So, but yeah, it's a really great point to ensure that we're mindful around the importance of building knowledge through literacy.
Anyone else have a question? Corey, I have one question. This is the second year of the Reading Act in Nebraska, correct?
The first full year for implementation was the 1920 school year.
Okay, so we're in our second year. Is the department going to be building or having started data to show the progress that's being made compared to past years since the Reading Act started? I don't know if this makes sense or not. To see if we can see the data to show that it's really working well for us.
It does make sense, and that's one of the requirements that was stricken from the bill, was the reporting requirement, simply because there were no fiscal appropriations to implement this bill, I might mention. So it costs to build some of those data collection pieces, and so I think districts are doing a really fantastic job with their local data, and a district, Grand Island Public Schools comes to mind. I think Grand Island Public Schools would be able to tell you over the last 2 years the number of students that have been identified, that have been placed on an individualized reading improvement plan, and the number of students that have come off of an individualized reading improvement plan. I also think there's an opportunity to leverage our partnership with NWEA in this space as well, especially for 3rd grade, because we do provide map growth testing starting at the 3rd grade level. So it's definitely something we would love to dig into. Part of it just gets back to making sure we have the appropriate resources to be able to do that.
I just want to put in a good word for the Reading Act. I was speaking to a young father the other day who said when his son took the test at the beginning of the year, it was not good. And the parents were worried and thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have struggles here. And by the time he took his second test, he had improved leaps and bounds. But it all kind of centered around the family-school partnership. the parents really working with the child, but he said it really opened his eyes as to the importance of reading. So I thought that was a nice compliment towards the Reading Act that we got in statute. Robin? Robin?
Just having a little trouble finding the right button. I can't let this pass. I just really appreciate the things that Patty made mention about the importance of early childhood education.
Anything else from anyone? Okay. Commissioner? Agenda item 3.5, information on accountability, accreditation, and approval rules.
And thanks, Corey, and welcome Brad Dirksen to go over some of this. One thing I will say, just for the general public's perspective, I think we have everything sorted out from a technology standpoint, but we'll keep monitoring that. And for the folks here in the boardroom, I'm watching so I can try to make sure when board members need to speak, we'll do that. So anyway, Brad, I'll turn it over to you and let you go through your presentation.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, board. I'm going to spend a few minutes this morning here talking to you about the concepts of approval, accreditation, and accountability. And really what we're talking about here are the revisions to Rule 10 and Rule 14. A little context, Rule 10 are the regulations and procedures for the accreditation of schools. These are the requirements that public schools need to meet on an annual basis in order to be accredited and operate in the state of Nebraska per state statute. And then also Rule 14 are the regulations and procedures for the legal operation of approved non-public schools. So you think of Rule 10 is a requirement for public schools. Rule 14 is a requirement for non-public schools. However, non-public schools can also be accredited under Rule 10. And the concepts that I mentioned before of approval, accreditation, and accountability are all intermixed into both Rule 10 and Rule 14. However, what is approval in Rule 10 and Rule 14 differ between the two, between publics and non-publics. So there's a little bit of confusion. And really why we're looking at revising Rule 14 and Rule 10 is to provide some clarity, especially around the general concepts of approval, accreditation, and accountability, and also separate that idea of what general compliance or minimum requirements for schools is, and separate that away from accreditation or that continuous improvement process that schools go through. So we want to provide clarity in the regulations so those concepts of approval, accreditation, and accountability are very clear to individuals. But we also want to make sure that while these are three distinct things, approval being minimum standards, accreditation being continuous improvement, and accountability being those outcomes, those data, and those measures, that they are interrelated and part of a larger system. So we want to create some coherence in that system amongst those three different concepts. We also realize that we have a finite amount of resources as a state, school districts, ESUs, the department, and we want to make sure that we provide equity with limited resources. So we're looking at creating a multi-site accreditation system. For right now, we have accreditation visits and accreditation teams that go out to schools on a 5-year basis. We're looking at a potential 3, 5, 7-year cycles in the accreditation system. So if a school is doing great and they're just knocking it out of the park, we can reward them with a 7-year visit, because we won't need to go back to that school probably as frequently as other schools. But if there's a school that's really struggling, there's a disconnect in regards to how they think their school is going, and really the view of the accreditation team, and there's other various factors, leadership issues, it might be appropriate that we have a 3-year cycle for accreditation visit for that specific school system. I imagine most schools would still stay on the 5-year cycle, but we at least have that option to provide a different type of a accreditation cycle for schools to help provide equity for our resources and give those school systems some additional assistance. We also want to ensure appropriate stakeholder involvement, in that the board has indicated that we want to get local school boards more involved in the approval, accreditation, and accountability processes, or at least recognize what their role is within those processes. So these new rules will provide some clarity in regards to that as well. A lot of this work is fundamentally tied back to board position statement S2. The board has, which position statement S2 is the accountability for a quality education system today and tomorrow, or AQuESTT board position statement. Historically, AQuESTT, a lot of people in the state of Nebraska think of AQuESTT, they think of just the accountability system in the state. When the board revised position statement S2, really broadened that out and really took a stake and said, AQuESTT is more than just the accountability system in the state. AQuESTT really is the framework for approval, accreditation, and accountability in the state of Nebraska. It's that backbone for all three of those different concepts. And as you know, AQuESTT has three broad domains: the leadership domain, the second domain being success, access, and support, and the third domain being teaching, learning, and serving. And those AQuESTT domains and then the subsequent tenets are going to be really the framework and how each of those three individual rules are structured. At the October 2020 State Board of Education meeting, the board took a stance and said, yes, our intent is to repeal current Rule 10 and 14. And what we are anticipating on doing is creating three new separate rules. The first rule is going to be approval, or the minimum standards to operate. Another rule is going to be around accreditation, synonymous with continuous improvement processes. And then the third rule being accountability, school measures, and data. So again, repealing two rules, the Rule 10 and Rule 14, and then promulgating three new rules around those three different concepts. Who's engaging in this work? We've been working on this for multiple years, 2-3 years in the works. The department staff has been leading the charge in this. It's not just one section of the department. We've really reached out to all the different offices and teams within the department to ensure that approval or minimum standards, continuous improvement encapsulates everything that the department does. And we're really trying to separate what is work of the department that is really minimum requirements and what work of the department should be tied into accreditation or that continuous improvement process or best practices. We've also really engaged administrators, teachers, staff through various means in regards to surveys with administrators. We have a commissioner as a state accreditation committee we've engaged over the last few years and gone through continual iterations of draft of the rules and the high level thinking of what the structure looks like. We've completely changed the system over time, our thought process, and have come up with pretty close to where we have as a current draft. We've been to conferences, we've presented at NDE Day, we've presented at ESUs to administrators and ESU staff. We've also engaged NCSA in presentations to administrators throughout the state. We're currently also engaging local school boards, and we're zooming into local school board meetings throughout the month of March to give local school boards also an update on these rules and regulation development. So we've really tried to engage as many people as possible, and we also want to make sure that we are engaging community members as well. Kind of when and how and what the process looks like. I've described a lot of the work up to this point. Again, it's been a multi-year process. This January to March time period is really this message that we're trying to get out of the new rule structure, those three separate rules, kind of what the big picture is, what the direction that we're going, and kind of preparing us to give people a framework to know what to expect when we start rolling rules out in early April, which is that April to June timeframe. We anticipate to have a draft copy of all three of those rules, the approval rule, the accreditation rule, and the accountability rule, posted onto the NDE website in early April. And then we'll also have a feedback tool so people can provide their public comments to those three individual rules. And then during the July to September timeframe, we will go ahead and take all the feedback we've heard from the open comment period, all the feedback we've heard from this winter in the last couple of years, and then make some final adjustments to those rules and regulations in efforts to create the hearing drafts, and then also to get to the point where the board wants to vote on three new proposed rules at the December 2021 meeting. If everything goes as planned, things are passed. We would then send the rule off to the AG's office, the governor's office, and then implementation would be in the fall of 2022. So we'd be looking at implementation of a 22-23 academic year for school districts and school systems, public and non-public. And that is the brief overview of the 3 new rules. Commissioner, I'll pass it back over to you.
Questions, Deborah?
Maybe it's too soon to know this, but what pieces of AQuESTT or accountability do you see being used in the approval standards? Or is it too soon to respond to that?
And the approval standards, what we're doing is we are organizing the approval rule based on AQuESTT domains. So we have those general compliance components or requirements. So people kind of have an understanding of why those general compliance components are in the rule, big picture wise, of why is curriculum in a certain domain versus another domain. So they can start making those connections and realizing, yep, those minimum requirements are really related to the success and the outcomes in the end product. So it kind of gives them a general framework. So really, we're not taking output measures in the accountability system and making them requirements as an approval component. We're more of using it as the framework or that structure, that backbone of the design of the approval rule. And then when we get into the AQuESTT, our framework for our accreditation or that continuous improvement process, we are explicitly using the domains and attendance as our standards for accreditation. So AQuESTT will be a heavy influence on the structure of our continuous improvement process.
Thank you.
Lisa?
First of all, what? Oh, first of all, Brad, thank you so much for your team and all the hard work that you've put into this. Looking at what you've done here with school accreditation, is there any futuristic possibility of doing something like this on the college level where there's an approval, different stages of approval and accreditation on the college level?
We do. The department has authority to approve educator preparation programs. So with the board's direction and then position statement S2, we can look at how we can build and have the structure of approval, accreditation, and accountability within an educator preparation framework, if that's the intent and the direction that the board provides.
And so that's being thought about?
Yes, that is. And we are currently engaging in conversations around educator preparation program approval and certification.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Robin?
Yeah, thank you very much. And my apologies for being kind of in and out on some of this stuff. I've got some issues going on. And so anyway, enough of that. I just wanted to emphasize to, especially, I guess, Brad and Corey and really the department for their undying attempts to involve stakeholder in their decision-making process. It's really been helpful as we listen to the people who are out there in the field.
Any other board members have a question for Brad? Thank you, Brad. I think you've answered everyone's questions and done a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, anything further from you?
Oh, that's all I have for my report. You can dock me for time on the technical difficulties, so.
Okay. Next is agenda item 4, the President's Report. Ryan is going to hand out to each of you the priorities that I have put into place for this year, for 2021. I appreciate all of the input that everyone sent me for me to consider. I worked with Patsy, Vice President Kojans, on putting this together. And I'm just going to read off to you the main topics. I've got 4 of them. One is just what Brad talked about: accountability, accreditation, and approval rulemaking. The second topic that's very near and dear to me and to most of us in this room, if not all, early childhood education. I think we zeroed in a lot on that with just the reading presentation given to us today. The other one, Lisa, educator preparedness and certification. You just talked with Brad about that, so we hope that we can make some strides with that this year. And the last one is a student voice on the State Board of Education. A couple of years ago, we started the conversation around having a student or students or an advisory group of students to work with the State Board of Education. And I'd like to see us do a deeper dive into that this year before the end of the year to see what we can come up with and engage those students that we need their voice. We need to hear their voice. So if any of you have any questions, I mean, you haven't had time to read this over, but if you have questions later, feel free to email me or give me a call. It is posted in Spark for you. The other thing is, on Monday, we had a professional learning time. It's the first one that we've had this year, something that I've wanted to have the board be part of. And our first one was with Robert Hull on Monday. He's the CEO of the National Association of State Boards of Education. And most of us have met him or will be meeting him. It was a 2-hour conversation. And so what I would like to do is to have each of the board members share one takeaway from that professional learning time that we had from that time with Robert. So Patsy, you had indicated to me that you would like to be the first one to speak.
I would love to be the first one. Okay. Well, first of all, let me say that Robert Hull filled those 2 hours with all kinds of information that struck home with me and made me stop and think about what we're doing and how we're doing it and what we could do to improve it. But one of the things that he said, and it was near the end of the meeting, was to as board members watch out for the little things, the things that maybe someone else would not notice or you didn't notice along the way. And so in the equity lens itself, we worked really, really hard on the subheadings like the who, and making sure that we recognized any and every marginalized person that we could, and then saying after that, well, this is a fluid document, so in 10 years, it's going to change, or it might change next year. And actually, before we even finished it, Robin Stevens added another group to that. But what struck me at the time is that at the top of the equity lens were these 3 words, and we had worked so hard about what went under them that I didn't realize that in the simplicity of those 3 words, there was a great message to all of us making decisions that are equitable and important to the teachers and students of Nebraska and administrators as well. And so those 3 words are consider, to stop and think about all the people involved and all of the facts and all of the data, to actually consider and what you're about to do. And then the next step, that simple word, collaborate, be willing to work with each other on the possible solutions. And that collaboration means that whether we agree, whether we disagree, whether it's comfortable or uncomfortable, to really work through the solutions and collaborate with each other. And then the last one probably is the hardest, because most of us are really good at the beginnings and the middles, but the finishing up work, which is probably the most important work, is where the greatest commitment comes in, because it's not very glamorous, the finish work on anything. And I know that from teaching and from directing plays and all that. That's when a lot of people quit. And so committing to what you're doing. And it has to be from everybody working on the project. And so Robert Hall he reminded me that sometimes it's in the simplest part of a problem or a document that comes the greatest wisdom.
Thank you, Patsy.
Lisa?
Well, Robert Hull takes a serious topic and turns it into a learning experience with humor, grace, knowledge, and all of his experiences. So I greatly appreciate him. But he asked us a question. How do we as a board member hold ourselves accountable? And I have been thinking about that off and on since that presentation. And so what I gleaned from that conversation was empower citizen leaders, represent the citizens' voice in education. We're a nonpartisan group, elected as nonpartisans. We need to stay that way. And thoroughly understand the problem before seeking a solution. Make sure you talk about it, research it, totally understand it before you ever take the first step of even thinking about a solution. That was the part that really made me think about my role as a state board member. How am I holding myself accountable? So,
thank you, Lisa. Patty, would you like to speak? And then I'll go to the ones on Zoom.
Sure, thank you. As a new board member, obviously everything that Robert Hull talked about had significance. I guess I'm tying on to Patsy's comment about simplicity, and also Lisa's about accountability, because I listened very carefully to what Robert said about what state board members do. And he didn't say at the end of that to be effective, but that's how I heard it. And the things he said were focus on all student achievement, which I thought tied directly to our vision of preparing all Nebraskas for learning, earning, and living. And I think sometimes we get bogged down with lots of other things, but for me, a guide is, how does this really impact people that we would consider our students? And ultimately, that's all Nebraskans. He also made the point that we need to be equitable. Certainly, we have emphasis in that through our equity lens, and that's also in our vision of all Nebraskans. He talked about the importance of doing your homework and being prepared, which I will say I tend to pride myself on. And as I sat listening to him, I was thinking, you know, as a new board member, I'm still determining how to best prepare and what homework, because there's so much that I could be reading and learning, but how do I narrow that down so that the homework I'm doing really makes the best contribution at our board meetings and as guidance to the Department of Education. He did say, ask questions. I added a couple of words to that. For me, it's ask pertinent questions and ask the difficult questions, because it's easy to ask easy questions, but we have to really pay attention to what's pertinent, what's important, and sometimes the questions we have to ask are difficult. They're difficult to ask, and they're difficult when we hear the answers. And finally, he said, don't be afraid to make decisions. And I added the word difficult to that as well, because it's really fun when you have a decision to make that's not challenging, not controversial, but boy, the ones that really force you to have courage is when those questions are difficult. But those are really important decisions for us to make. So I've adopted those kind of as my guiding principles as a new board member.
Deborah?
You know, I guess I would just say that one of the things that although I missed the training, I am excited about the dynamics of this year. I've loved my board experiences for the last couple of years. I've learned so much from the staff and my fellow board members, and I just think that this last year with the pandemic and other events that have happened have brought so many new challenges to light. And I think we are going to move into a year of tougher conversations. And yet I couldn't think of 7 other people I'd rather have those with. I have tremendous respect for everyone, and I'm just excited about what's ahead and look forward to, working with everybody.
Jacqueline?
Unfortunately, due to a work conflict, I was not able to participate with the group. I do have the recording, but I haven't read it yet, so I'll give feedback at a different time. Thank you.
Robin?
I'm glad that I can follow up on what Deborah said. What I really liked, the very best part, was when we all loosened up and were starting to talk and listen to each other as board members. That was by far the best part with my experience.
Thank you, Robin. Pat?
Well, probably the thing that was my aha was professional development. We spend a great deal of time talking about professional development for others. Teachers should have professional development. Administrators should have professional development. And school boards, local school boards should have professional development. And a number of years ago, before any of you were on the board, we did several similar activities that we did with Robert Hall. We did it with Brenda, who was the CEO of NASB at the time. And I think that's really important that we understand that our professional development is just as important as all of the people we're telling to have professional development. And I'm very glad that we have started this again. and continue to do that, because there's so many things that I found that I knew, but it's something to stop and think about again. And I think, my fellow board members have said that it made me think about this, or it made me think about that. So professional development was my aha for us.
Pat, did I miss anyone? I just want to say that my aha was having us together, having conversation. Robert talked about things that, like Pat said, I've heard before, but it made me stop and think. Here I am, 6 years on the board, and that reminder of what he shared with me, am I holding myself accountable for it? Am I doing my role as well as I should? I really, really liked the starfish story that we've probably all heard before, where there's all the starfish that have been swept up on the beach. And some folks go walking along the beach and they just keep passing up the starfish, but one gentleman picks up the starfish as he walks and throws it back into the ocean, and keeps walking and picks up another one, throws it back. And as they progress, one of the friends said to him, "Why are you throwing them back in the ocean? That's just one starfish. You're not really going to do anything. And you're not really going to save all of these because you can't get them all in there." But he said, "But I can save that one." And each time he could save one at a time. And he talked about how educators, our role as educators, that's what we always wanted to do, was to at least save one student if we couldn't reach all of them. But our job as a board is to look beyond that. It's to look out there onto the horizon and focus on the ocean, because there's a lot underneath of what we see that we need to delve into. But again, the thing that I really liked what he said also was, each of us is one voice on this board. And where we really have a real voice is here at the table. When we're out there with our constituents, we really just need to be listening, because you can't make decisions there. But at the table, you can bring that information back to make a difference. So I just learned so many things, and I was so appreciative of him being able to be with us for those 2 hours, and to be able to meet his schnauzer at the very end, who was ready to bark. He needed his dad. So yeah, I was very appreciative. Deborah, did you have a question?
To add something, you mentioned the starfish story, and I guess the district that I represent, I think that's, I want them to know that, we aren't just wanting to fix that one child and throw it back, but like you said, we are very aware that the ocean needs to be fixed. And, that's really, we need to look at those things that, it isn't always the child. It's the environment that they're learning in, and I'm glad that you mentioned that. Things like biases in school and poor nutrition and, all of the things that, make for a positive learning experience. And so I just wanted to, anyway, thank you for letting me say
And
that.
it was, the session was recorded. Even, if you haven't, if you want to go back and look at it again and recheck some things, go right ahead. So, Ryan, is that link on Spark, or where would we find that link?
Get it from Andrea.
Okay, Andrea, you've got it. Thank you. Okay. We've done that. We've done this. I just want to follow up on what the commissioner said earlier. Thank you to this staff. the entire staff with this move that is going on, the pandemic, doing all their work that they need to get done with the pandemic, which just continues all the hard work, and the crew that is here today. I'm sure Drew has been sweating bullets over there a bit with the technology, but a lot of work goes into just setting all this up for us because of the pandemic, and it'll be great when we can all be back together at the Department of Education.
That's right.
All right, so that's my report. Moving on to agenda item 5, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Lisa? Is there a second? Patty?
Approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. And Patty, you're seconding it. Okay. Per board policy, there is no discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda. Andrea, please call the roll.
Morrison? Approved. Neary? Approved. Kojons?
Yes.
Fricky?
Yes.
Goebbels?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Andrea. Agenda item 6. Standing committee reports. Agenda item 6.1, Policy Committee. Pat, please provide a report from the Policy Committee meeting.
Okay. Let's see. We had 3 items from the consent agenda that we did discuss that are new contracts. There were questions on the Zern math, and the commissioner answered those questions. It's a professional development program for teachers. The board members also asked for information on the contract with the Center for Assessment. And we had a discussion on how COVID is impacting this work and how we can improve this process and how we are involving teachers. And per NDE, we're using an advisory group of teachers to help inform NDE and get this perspective. And I believe that was mentioned by a couple of our staff this morning as well, so that we get some consistency. We also have an action item today that is the comprehensive annual financial report audit. And we'll get to that when we have our action items. We reviewed the audit, noting nothing that an agreement was in place prior to the pay, NDE reviewed the audit finding, noting that an agreement was in place prior to the pay raise increase, but the contract wasn't completed prior to the work of the work with YRTC on April 1st at the beginning of the pandemic, and was kind of pushed aside, but that's all been corrected and taken care of. We reviewed the monthly board travel expenses, and noting there's really not much going on because we're just not traveling that much. We held a short discussion on if approvals are needed when there are no costs associated with attending a virtual function, and it was determined that it was really not needed in those instances. We also discussed a review of revised Rule 1 regulations on governing the audit of Nebraska public school districts. The proposed revisions to Rule 1 were discussed, and it was noted that all changes were technical in nature, other than the requirement to test school building allocations, which was a result of ESSA changes requiring school level per pupil cost. And NDE noted that they had been working with several different auditing firms on the proposed changes. There was also discussion on Rule 2, which is a uniform system of accounting. NDE noted all changes were technical in nature there and were the result of, again, ESSA changes, and that currently 243 of our school districts account on a cash basis with Omaha using a modified accrual accounting, but they are converting to a cash basis as well. Then we moved on to policy. We didn't have any discussion items.
Pat?
Yes.
Don't move on to policy yet.
Oh, okay.
Actually, for the rest of the board, Pat started with the finance and budget versus the policy. I asked her to do the policy first. So we are going to move over to, before she moves on to policy, to agenda item, well, she's already given us the report. 6.6. And that's, hold on one second. Go ahead and read that. Have her do it again. Okay, Pat, we are going to move to agenda item 6.6.C for the board. And Pat, is there a motion on item 6.6.C? Dealing
Yes.
with the comprehensive annual financial report audit.
I move to accept the 2020 comprehensive annual financial report audit.
Is there a second? Deborah, did I see your hand? Okay. Okay, motion made by Pat and seconded by Deborah. Is there any discussion on this motion? Any from Robin? Okay. Seeing none, Andrea, please call the roll.
Nichols,
Yes.
Fricky,
Was that me? Sorry about the cough. Yes.
Kojons. Yes. Morrison.
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Stevens,
Yes.
Neary. Yes. Goebbels. Yes. 8 yes.
Motion passes. We're going to move to agenda item 6.6D. Board members, is there any discussion on item 6.6D, which is the proposed revised Rule 1 Rules and Regulations governing the audit of the Nebraska public school districts? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to 6.6E. Is there any discussion on item 6.6E, the discussion of reviewing the proposed revised Rule 2, Uniform System of Accounting for Nebraska Public School Districts? Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Pat, do you want to move back to your policy committee report?
Sure. Now that I've shuffled all my papers around. We didn't have any discussion items. We do have 2 action items coming up in regards to expenses and committees. We had quite a discussion the last time around in our last meeting on bylaw B2, which states the makeup of the committees and what the way they're described. And we also had quite a discussion last time, and we'll have a action item on B16, which has to do with reimbursement for expenses because there's been some changes in statute.
Okay.
That's my report.
All right. Pat, is there a motion on item 6.1A?
Yes, there is.
Bylaw B2?
Yes, if I can find it, we'll be right there. Here we go. I move to approve proposed revisions to State Board Bylaw B2.
Okay. Motion was made by Pat. Is there a second? Patty. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Andrea, please call the roll.
Stevens,
Yes.
Nichols. Fricky. Kojons. Tim,
Yes?
Morrison,
Yes.
Neary, Googles. 8 yes.
Motion passes. Pat, is there a motion on item 6.1B, bylaw B16?
Yes, I move to approve proposed revisions to State Board Bylaw B16.
Do I have a second? Patty? Thank you. Okay, the motion was made by Pat and seconded by Patty. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Andrea, please call the roll.
Morrison,
Yes.
Neary, Fricky, Kojons, Googles, Nichols, Tim,
Yes?
Stevens.
Yes.
8 yes.
Passes. Agenda item 6.1C. Board members, is there any discussion on item 6.1C, the 4-year review of State Board Bylaw B12 policy development? Any further discussion for Pat or the committee? Okay. That takes care of the policy committee. We will move on to agenda item 6.2, the legislative committee. Robin, please provide a report from the legislative committee meeting.
Powers, get that all sorted out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian will be providing most of the report. However, I do want to emphasize to the board that because of the fluid nature of our legislative session, when you go to Spark, look not only at the agenda, but look at our legislative committee minutes as well. And it can change almost from day to day because of the fluid nature of the legislature as it is in session. So I just encourage all board members to try to find maybe more than one time to read through those things. And as you read through those, if there was one area that I would want to emphasize, it would be on the area. I think there were 16 bills that we are proponents for. I would like for you to spend some time in looking at those. We're excited about the chance of having Senator Walls. The commissioner has worked with Senator Walls, the head of the Education Committee in the Nebraska Unicameral. And I believe next Thursday, she is going to be joining us on our weekly Thursday morning Zooms. So we're excited about that this coming Thursday. We have no action items, and with that, I'll turn it over to Brian, and I have nothing else to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Halstead, Deputy Commissioner. I think as the chair indicated, the legislature this session, because of the pandemic, is operating a little bit different than they have in all past years. They made a specific emphasis to get all public hearings done as quickly as possible, which required hearings in the morning and the afternoon. Next Tuesday is the 39th legislative day of the possible 90-day session. And of the 16 bills we were proponents on, already 4 of those bills have been advanced from committee and will be on general file next week. So a quarter of the bills we were proponents for have so far moved out. The next several weeks, you will see activity by committees in executive session and deciding which of many bills will be advanced. Next Thursday is the deadline for priority bill designation by committees and senators. The Education Committee has already selected its 2 priority bills, LB 528, which is commonly referred to as the cleanup bill for all education statutes, which makes minor changes throughout those, and then LB 529, which is the bill that provides for the next 5 years uses of lottery funds for education. So they have prioritized those 2. They have not advanced them yet. So at this point, we're constantly in contact with senators and staff in the legislature and working very hard. The board legislative committee has had some robust discussions this past month about a number of bills, whether they were bills we were proponents on or other bills that other entities are involved with. So I'll stop right there and see if the chair has anything further he needs from me.
No, Robin does not have anything further. Agenda item 6.2A is reviewing the 2021 proposed state legislation and take action on board positions, and there is no action on that. So thank you, Robin and Brian. Much appreciated. Moving on to agenda item 3, the Commissioner's Appraisal Committee, and I will be giving you a report on that. The Appraisal Committee is made up of Pat Tim and Vice President Co-Johns and myself. And we will be meeting by Zoom this next week with Joel Sherling, who's in charge of the appraisal process on staff. And we will be going over finalization of the appraisal and the report format. You will be briefed at the April board meeting of the appraisal process, followed up by individual links and technical assistance document that you'll be filling out later in April. And there'll be dates and deadlines given to you at the April board meeting. With that, that completes my report. Are there any questions? Lisa?
On the appraisal, at the end, there's usually links to what the commissioner has done. Is it a possibility to have those links sent out to us a little earlier so we can study them in advance of having to fill them out?
I'll get back to you on that question. Okay, after we meet, I'll get back to you on that. Commissioner?
I can just add that we're trying, actually, between Joel and myself, trying to make that a little more streamlined. If you remember in the past, there were actually 10 different folders per quarter, which makes it a little complex. I've talked to Joel to try to create a bit of a process that'll streamline that for all of you. So when you're going through like a summary document, you'll just be able to click on the highlighted areas. So that might take us a little more time, but it's going to save you with the back end trouble of trying to look at that in the background. So that's my hope and intent, and we'll try to make that work a little better for you technically.
Madam Chair, if that happens, you don't need to ask the committee. That's exactly what I was addressing. Thank you.
And for those, for Jacqueline and Patty, you're probably sitting there in the fog going, okay, I really don't know what's going on. But trust me, this is my 6th year on the board, and has it been the last 2 years prior? We really Pat worked really hard as the chair of the appraisal committee, and between she and Joel and the committee, they set up a fantastic electronic way to appraise the commissioner. Evaluate him as such, and you will find it very easy to do. I think it's very easy compared to when I first came on the board.
I'll add too that the back end work on that actually took a lot of programming, And so I'm trying to help our folks that were working on that programming side. So it'll be even better, I think, for you and even better for them, which I'm trying to make their world a little easier too.
All right. Agenda item 6.4, AQuESTT Teaching, Learning, and Serving Domain. Lisa?
Yes, ma'am. The Committee on AQuESTT Teaching, Learning, and Serving Domain report, just one discussion item this time. It's the first draft of the Nebraska Health Education Standards that will be released March 10th, next Wednesday. And NDE staff member Corey Epler will provide a brief, some brief information about that to the board on the public input process. As soon as I close this report, which I'm going to do right now, this concludes the AQuESTT Teaching and Learning and Serving Domain Committee report. So hopefully Corey's out there in cyberspace somewhere.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning.
I will be brief. As Lisa mentioned, we will publicly release draft 1 of the Nebraska Health Education Standards on Wednesday, March 10th. When that draft is released, we'll be sure to let the board members know that it's available. I do believe we intend to do a press release indicating that the draft is released, in addition to the opportunity to provide public feedback via survey. So as we release the draft, we'll also release the link for the input survey. So we hope to come back to you all next month. And I say we, Lacey Peters, our physical education and health education specialist. She and I will be back next month for discussion on the first draft. So thank you all.
Thank you, Corey. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, Corey, can you kind of go over with me what the review process will be? Yeah.
And by review process?
So how many reviews will this go through? And you said there's a survey. How much time are we giving people to, are we going to, when is public comment going to be a part of the process? Yeah.
So public comment will be via survey. That's how we've been operating for all content area standards. And because of COVID, we're not going to be hosting in-person meetings. The survey will be open next Wednesday, and it'll remain open until the state board approves the draft this fall. So what we do is we have one survey that we keep open, and then each time drafts are revised, we will update or upload the new draft. So I anticipate we may have a couple of drafts we might do draft 2 and draft 3. I think it'll just be a function of A, the amount of feedback that we get, and B, the types of changes that will be made. I'm really proud of draft 1 as I have reviewed it at this point. I think it's a very strong first draft, and we're anxious again for you all to have an opportunity to review and then to get public feedback as well. So once the survey opens on Wednesday, send it out and people can continue to provide feedback through the month of March, and then we have an ongoing process in terms of reviewing that. So with our writing team and then also back to our advisory team as well.
I have 2 more questions. Somewhere I thought I understood that the advisory committee, that they were given 2 weeks to review it. Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, I don't know that that's, I'm not aware of any that they have had 2 weeks or that they will have 2 weeks.
That they'd get 2 weeks starting on Wednesday. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's not correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep it open. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then a lot of you that are on the board now and some of the staff were a part of I think an all-day discussion that we had with the chair, the person who helped guide the National Health Education Standards. And Loved those standards, and I just wonder, I don't know if it's even possible to comment on how ours compare.
Yeah, I think as you get into the draft, once they're publicly available, I think we'll be able to have that conversation. I don't think I'm ready to have that conversation today. I'm not the subject matter expert. Lacey is not with us today. So as you take a look at draft one, and as some of those questions come up, feel free to direct them to me. I do think you'll see strong alignment to multiple sets of standards that our schools are already using.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
Corey, will this input via the website function similarly to the social studies standards, where during the process of a draft, people put input, then you create the draft and look at input and change it and then put it back out several times before fall?
Yeah, we'll follow the same process. I think it's important to consider that we look at every individual piece of feedback that's received. That doesn't mean that every individual piece of feedback is incorporated, because that certainly goes back to our writing team and our subject matter experts through our advisory team. But we will be sure to track the differences between draft one and draft two. And what we did for social studies that we intend to do in this case is keep both drafts up. So we'll have a devoted webpage to the health education standards process, where you'll just be able to see the evolution of the drafts. Actually, we already have the webpage, because I believe our presentation from August is up there as well. So yes, we intend to be able to track that and be as transparent as possible.
I appreciate that. I know it was appreciated during the social studies, and that's what I thought, but thank you for verifying that.
Anyone else have questions? Do Robin or Pat have questions? Okay, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Lisa. Moving on to agenda item 6.5, AQuESTT Student Success, Access, and Support Domain. Vice President Kojans?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to thank my committee members, Jacqueline, Pat, and Deborah, for engaging in the tough questions throughout our meeting yesterday. We are a courageous group. I think Melody Hobson is here to discuss with us the first item in my report, which is a review of Rule 11 and a waiver for Santee Community Schools. So I'm checking to see if she is.
I'm here.
Okay, Melody. I thought I'd start with you so you didn't have to wait so long.
Okay, thank you. Rule 11 was revised a couple of years ago, and based on some changes in state statute, we now have a waiver process for school districts that have to hire teachers who are not yet certified. There are some very specific requirements for what makes a candidate qualify for a waiver. The school district does that on behalf of any teacher that they want to hire. Santee Community Schools has 4 classrooms. They have 3 early childhood classrooms. They have 3 certified teachers. They have a 4th teacher who has been through all of her schooling, but she has not passed the praxis yet. And the Santee Community Schools, when they tried to hire the last time for another teacher, there were no applicants. So the school has been very responsive and has gotten the information that they can to us. They've worked with me to look at their situation and do everything they can to meet the requirements. And so that this recommendation was to approve their waiver request.
Thank you, Melody, for always being available to us. The committee had one discussion item on Leading for Equity and Excellence and LEAP, the State Policy Network. The committee discussed the importance of maintaining our Nebraska LEAP committee group for stakeholders for our future work. And we appreciate their continuing efforts for us. The committee discussed 3 main goals to accomplish this year, which we're all very excited about. The first goal is to develop an equity policy for NDE. We have most of the pieces, and now it's time to put them together with a policy. The policy serves as a model for school districts and requires school districts to develop and implement local equity plans. So we are modeling what we're expecting. The equity policy should put an emphasis on human dignity, increasing access to equitable resources and programs for all students, creating and maintaining environments that are equitable, fair, safe, diverse, and inclusive, and reducing racial isolation by increasing integration and diversity, and improving access to a diverse educator workforce. The committee recommended actions and strategies for improving equity and reducing achievement and opportunity gaps. Examples of action plans included provide tailored and differentiated professional learning to build capacity for cultural responsiveness, to address areas of inequity identified by the school system, require that an equity lens be used in reviews of staff, curriculum, pedagogy, and professional learning, instructional materials, and assessment design, identify the method of evaluation to measure the effect of equitable practices in school systems and schools. The second goal of the committee for this year, for 2021, is to keep equity at the forefront and center of NDE policies. This includes prioritizing investments for vulnerable populations, selection of populations served by NDE, students with disabilities, students of color, ELL, etc., and the selection of services provided by NDE, addressing the whole child and academic enrichment and opportunities for our students. The last goal is to address, and this one might be the most important right now, the last goal is to address inequities during COVID-19 pandemic, including food insecurity, mental health and well-being, child abuse prevention, translation, communication, and child care. This concludes the AQuESTT Student Success, Access, and Support Committee report.
Deborah?
Was there an action item? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Did anybody have anything else they wanted to say?
Yes.
Lisa?
I just wanted to commend the committee for what you just stated that your goals are, because the multicultural bill made it out of committee. I can't remember the number, 359, I think. But anyway, a lot of the things that are in there will supplement what you all have decided as your goals, and I think that's going to work out very well if that's passed.
Robin?
Yes, Chairperson Patsy. I just wanted to make people aware of, based on Melody Hobson's presentation, that again, praxis has become, in my opinion, a barrier and a barrier that we need to work through in Rule 10. And I know that Brad Dirksen is doing that, but it's just a major concern that we see across the state that praxis is a barrier to certification, not a method to support as we work through teacher shortages.
That we've heard that several times today now, so hopefully we will begin to work on that. Any other questions or additions?
I just wanted to say, Patsy, your committee has worked very, very hard on this. It's very evident and obvious that you've put a lot of time and commitment into it with your members, so thank you. It's a very, very important topic, as we all know.
A great committee.
Patsy, is there a motion on item 6.5A?
I move to approve a waiver for Santee Community Schools regarding qualifications for the one early childhood education teacher described in the materials for item 6.5A.
Do I have a second? Lisa?
Second.
Motion was made by Patsy and seconded by Lisa. Is there any discussion on this motion? Pat or Robin have anything? Okay. And seeing none, Andrea, please call the roll.
Neary? Kojons?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
Fricky? Yes. Goebbels? Yes. Tim?
Yes.
Morrison?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
8 yes.
Board members, is there any discussion on item 6.5B, Leading for Equity and Excellence Program, LEAP? Deborah?
Want to give a shout out to the leadership that Patsy's provided and her partnership with Zainab. The two of them together have really done the heavy lifting for this, and I'm really, this is one of the things that I'm most excited about this year. So thank you, Patsy. Really appreciate your leadership. And Zainab, wherever you are.
Hey. Patsy?
Yeah, I wanted to say that this Leading for Equity and Excellence program started our work and has guided our work. And I think that one of the most important things, besides learning about the lens in the very beginning, is that we put together a LEAP group, and they represent, they're a very diverse multicultural group coming from ESUs and schools and parents. And I think I said yesterday, I think the only flaw in it is we still don't have a student representative, which I tried to get, but I promised yesterday to make sure that we got one. So the Leading for Equity and Excellence program has really been a help in guiding us along our way, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity a long time ago. And I believe that 3 years ago, that was Ryan who recommended me for that, and I'm grateful to him because it's been something really important to me.
If I recall correctly, and maybe I'm not, but Robert Hall in our professional learning the other day talked about our equity lens and how it has actually become a template for other states across the country. So Nebraska is leading in the way. So thank you, committee, and thank you, Patsy, for your leadership, and you, Zainab's as well. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6.7, Strategic Planning, Performance and Improvement Committee. Deborah Neary, is there a report?
A very short one. Just grateful to committee members, Pat Tim, Jacqueline Morrison, and Patsy Kojons. And I'm really excited about where we are in the process with our strategic plan. everybody knows that a good strategic plan is, you know, it's living, it's breathing, and it's nimble. And we are, since there's only one board member, I believe, that's still on the board that was in place when the plan was initially put in place, we're at and everything we've been through with the pandemic, we're at a really great point to kind of revisit some important points of it and look at some new metrics. And so we just ask everybody to you all received a copy of the strategic plan on the day of orientation. We will be having a lot of conversations around that. Please keep that close in our meetings. And we are going to be creating a new vision statement and a value statement, which we don't have a value statement in place right now, but we really thought it's an important time to just really first talk about our values, and that will be a very exciting process, and look forward to any ideas from anywhere. So that's it for my report. Thank you.
Board members, is there any discussion on what Deborah just talked about on the future plans? I just want to say, Deborah, you and your committee, I really like that you're putting in the new vision and the value statement, because we need to keep moving forward and remain visionary. So thank you. Thank you for your committee, you and your committee's work.
I would love to take credit for that, but that was all Ryan. And so thank you, Dr. Ford, for making me look good once again.
There's nothing wrong with giving credit where credit is due. Okay. Thank you, Deborah. Agenda item 7, additional business. We have none. Agenda item 8, special presentations and discussions. There are none today. Agenda item 9, information items and reports. Agenda item 9.1, thank you for submitting your monthly reports. And at this point in time, I don't believe there's any on there, nor is it necessary at this point to do anything. 9.2 through 9.4, the next items are information items and written reports for the board and for our information only. Agenda item 10, the good of the order. This section of the agenda is intended for board members to offer informal observations of the work of the state board. Board members may make brief announcements about attendance at future events for the purpose of informing other board members. No business or motions or suggested actions of the board may be offered at this point in the agenda, nor should board members engage in substantive discussion about other agenda items or introduce new agenda items. So, does any board member have anything for the good of the order? Deborah.
I just want to say thank you to our president and vice president, because I know I'm kind of a high maintenance board member and I'm asking you guys to do a lot of things. And you both have been so responsive and helpful. I appreciate the letter that you sent over to the education committee. And I just appreciate all the things that you guys have done to, you know, just be responsive as things come up. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah.
Anyone else? Robin or Pat? Okay. Ryan, I think you indicated to me you wanted to speak when we got done.
Yes, thank you.